This is the RC202 Looper. I'm going to take a look at some of its features, the pros and cons, explain how I use it in my live performances. The 202 is pretty much perfect for what I want, which is creating transitions between tracks, meaning that I can change patterns on the TR8S and the circuit and have a loop running at the same time, so I don't get a break in the music and I can transition nice and smoothly. I'll start a sequence running. This is coming purely from the circuit, the two synth sounds, into the external input of the TR8S, and the drums are then going through as well through these two cables into the audio input of the 202. The live signal is processed through the input effects here, so if for example I want to put a high pass filter on, I can do that, and I've got control over the depth of that filter there, and I can just turn that back off again. I can these two tracks are currently empty because there's no lights illuminated on there. I can quantize, record, loop, and the quantized settings are pretty extensive. You can be unquantized, or you can do beginning of a bar, beginning of a beat, that kind of thing. I tend to have it at the beginning of a bar, I think. So if I record a loop here, I just hit go, and the red shows that it's recording, reference to a favorite YouTube channel there, and then stop the loop. Now you've got a live signal still running at the same time as the playback of the loop from the 202. So if I turn down the volume on the TR8S, this is now just what you can hear from the 202. I'll evidence that. You can stop that and then play it back again. And this is all still MIDI synced. Now that I've got a loop running here, I could quite easily change patterns on these other two pieces of kit, or I can also put something like a reverb over the top of that, so this loop here is being affected by the track effects here, and you can switch between which track you want affected using the track. Well, one thing that I forgot to show on that last clip, so I've recorded another, is the volume control of a loop, which is, it's not ideal, but it works. So if I've got my loop still running here, and I want to fade in my new track, I can do that. But then obviously I want to fade out the old loop rather than just stopping it dead. So what I can do then is pick the track and then use the value control here to just drop the volume of that. And obviously you can do that as gently as you want, and then just stop the loop. And move on to your next piece. It's pretty well built, to be fair. It's a plastic chassis. These buttons here are quite spongy. The dials are pretty well made, and they feel sturdy. This value control has notches every few degrees when you turn it, and a push button feature. On the back you've got the socket for the DC power supply, power control on and off, USB connection which is for audio and for file transfer. I'll go through that in a bit. You've got standard MIDI in and out, 5-pin. You've got a socket for an expression controller, like a foot pedal. You've got your left and your right outputs, which can be either one stereo pair or two mono. And then you've got your audio input, either a stereo pair or two mono. And then there's an XLR connection for a microphone. On the front here, you've also got a 35mm headphone socket and a 35mm stereo auxiliary input. The back is pretty plain, but it has got a metal panel, and there's 4 self-adhesive feet that came with it to stop it scratching the work surface. So if I turn it on, you get the traditional Roland light show. Always fun. The USB connection, as I mentioned before, is multifunction. You can do MIDI over USB. You can do audio over USB, which means that external audio, so you can have your channels left and right here from, in my case, the TR8S. and then I can record directly to the computer from that. Finally, the USB also can go into storage mode, which means that you can drag and drop WAV files. One thing that I'm considering doing, and I haven't really done much of yet, is using one loop for live recording, for transitions between tracks, for example, and then the other one for a backing synth line perhaps, or an atmospheric sound, or pre-recorded Foley sound maybe. And in that way I can keep using my instruments but also have something else running in the background just as a stopgap if there's a problem. There is an undo function which is kind of handy. If you create a loop and then you overdub another bit of audio over the top of that, you can undo that second recording and get back to your original loop. The 202's got quite a deep memory system. There are 8 banks, each with 8 phrases in, that you select from using these controls that are also the effects controls. So if I want to pick bank number 1, patch 1, that's there, patch 2 there, and then if I want to go to a different memory bank, I use the value control to select. Within each bank you can have different effects pre-selected within there. On the downsides, these FX buttons, they don't always do exactly what it says on the labels. So for example, this one is currently showing as distortion when the label says it's a pitch shifter. My biggest gripe with the 202 is actually the multifunctional display. The settings are really quite in-depth within this unit, and trying to understand which menu system you're in and what it does from just a 3 8-segment LED display is just too difficult to remember all of the weird shortcuts that you've got. The RC505, which is the more upmarket version of the loop station, actually has a dedicated volume control for each track. Unfortunately, with the 202 being the smaller unit and more basic, you have to use the value control to edit the volume of each loop. That's a bit of a shame. I think it could have been quite easily done to give you a button on each of the 2 tracks, and then you could use the parameter control to adjust the volume of the tracks, but there you go. Thanks very much for watching. If there's anything that I've missed, please leave a question in the comments below and I'll do what I can to help.